Rewind the Dynamite from the post-wrestling site. AEW, lighting up the fuse. Sit back and enjoy the bubbly as we hear from John and Wai Ting. Where we're going, we don't need roads. And if the buck stops here, this thing might blow. Everything you hear are opinions of the show. And if you don't like it, go to the forums and let them know.
And we are now going to be getting into Dynamite from Wednesday night in Fresno, California. It is John Pollock and Wai Ting with you. We just went through all of the news from the past 24 hours or so, discussing Fred Ottman breaking the news, the natural disasters going into the WWE Hall of Fame as well. Stephanie's Places, the new series that is sweeping ESPN Plus. Hopefully no streaming issues like the UFC encountered this past weekend. Plus, also going through the New Japan Cup results as the second round has begun, and a short preview of our interview that we have up on the Post Wrestling Cafe with Scott D'Amore, which we are going to be releasing on Thursday for everybody leading into their two nights this coming Friday and Saturday in Windsor, Ontario. It's a busy weekend coming up, as it is almost every weekend. We have Maple Leaf Pro Wrestling this weekend. TNA has a show on Friday night. SmackDown's over to Barcelona, Spain. And biggest of all, Wai Ting's birthday on Friday, meaning we're going to be Tingless this Friday. Instead, it will be Neil Flanagan, who is on birthday duty on Fridays when someone is off. So Neil and I will be together, and because this is an earlier SmackDown for those outside of the US, we're going to be doing the show at 9 p.m. Eastern time for members of the Post Wrestling Cafe, meaning if you are in the US, by the time SmackDown ends, you'll pretty much have the show ready to listen to by that time. So we will be going a bit earlier on Friday because of the earlier start time that Neil and I will be watching SmackDown. Raw, we will probably just keep at the usual start time on Mondays, and I will be slowly nudging Wai to try and go a little earlier on Friday nights, potentially. We will see how these Fridays work.
Look, I mean, if we could pull it off, then let's try for that. Yeah, that sounds great. Of course, XL editions for all of these shows available in the Post Wrestling Cafe, where we also released our latest edition of Talk, where you can get probably in the morning the latest edition of MCU Later, where Rich and WH will be talking about Daredevil Episode 3 and beyond in every single week to come, as well as all the cafe bonuses. So we thank you if you're a supporter of the Post Wrestling Cafe. Episode
3 is on my agenda tonight after we finish the show. That's right. My plan. I also watched the first episode of the new Drive to Survive season.
Did you enjoy it?
I did, based on your recommendation. This pretty much the overview of the first episode is all the allegations around Christian Horner and how it was handled. And I mean, we talk about it for like just the wrestling side of things, of, you know, a scandal that I think many people can apply to what WWE went through and sort of how it was handled within F1. And you do have, like, it's not like Christian Horner cut himself off from production of Drive to Survive. Like you don't get a whole lot of insight from Christian Horner, but you do, I would say, like, if you're interested in sort of just the handling of it, making him available to media, you certainly see like there is a level of access that still existed for Red Bull that whole week, series of weeks that this was going on, and the email leak to all of the press members with the various text messages and WhatsApp messages that they had. If you've been following the story, I would say this first episode, you cannot accuse Netflix or Drive to Survive of shying away from like a real world set of allegations here against one of the main players in F1.
Are you going to join the F1 Fantasy League that Chris Elliott has set up for us for post-wrestling audiences?
I'll check it out. Maybe I will. I'm starting to get that spark of F1. They're kicking off this weekend, right? Is it, where are they? Australia?
I believe so. Yes. Australia is Sunday. Yeah, that's right. Australian Grand Prix. So, yep. Join our thread, everybody, at Post Racing over at forum.postwrestling.com if you want to find links to our fantasy league and just a general discussion about the F1 calendar, of course.
And I'll also make note that besides the Scott D'Amore interview that we'll release for everyone on Thursday, Rewind to SmackDown on Friday, Saturday, special edition of Postmarks, as Bruce Lord and David Myers are welcoming Brandon Thurston from WrestleNomics. He will be on Postmarks this coming Saturday. Collision Course Saturday night and Sunday. Get ready, everyone. Pack a lunch. It's time for the NWA podcast, as they will all get together for hours of discussion about everything going on in professional wrestling. It is your Sunday night attraction.
Always, yes. Mm-hmm.
Tonight's edition of Dynamite followed Revolution. They were at the Save Mart Center in Fresno, California. Last number from WrestleTix, 3,481. And we had talked a bit about Monday night when we finished the show. The only announcements we had were that Kenny Omega and MJF will appear on the show. And obviously there were, Tony Khan had said as much, that there were going to be, it was a very hard-hitting Revolution with people banged up and injured and unsure who would be available. And we got the announcement on Tuesday of this International Championship Eliminator Tournament that would begin tonight, as well as a couple of matches. But I do have to say, just looking at the graphic that they had a few hours before Dynamite, this looked like one of the more underwhelming Dynamite lineups I can recall. And Orange Cassidy and Hechicero, really interesting match to watch, but I think there is certainly the argument of like carrying a show and keeping people for 2 hours for that. I think it's going to prove to be really, really tough when it comes to just the attraction that you had to build the show around. And we'll talk about they certainly did get some of the stars on the show, but in non-physical capacities.
Yeah. I guess it's always interesting to think about like these sort of unknown handicaps that might prevent a show from being actually built up, prior to it. Again, without really knowing sort of the ins and outs, it's hard to really say what he should or shouldn't have done.
Well, Kenny Omega starts off the show and he comes out, big star reaction. He's high-fiving. He's handed a bouquet of roses, which I really think he should have just held for his entire promo.
Very, very Japanese thing.
Yeah,
giving
very
flowers.
much so. Well, it is Fresno. He mentions the doctors, his trainers, an unlikely friend in Will Ospreay that have allowed him to not only come back, but he is now a singles champion. And he also thanks Takeshita for pushing him and dragging him to that place. He wants to face the best on the planet. And thus, this Eliminator tournament is going to prove who is the best on the planet. Which was kind of funny because I do understand that, we don't want to slot our championships at various levels, but we talked about all these baby faces getting these big wins at Revolution. And we have Will Ospreay, who, the way this was positioned on the show, like he is above this championship. He is going for the world title. Hangman Page is winning. He is above this championship. He is going for the world title. And we've got, the next tier that are in this Eliminator tournament.
Yeah, unfortunately, with a title like this, it's sort of like not very well defined, and you add to that the Continental Championship. Like, what exactly is the thing that separates the international championship from the World Championship? It's to be, I guess, accepted that it should be a tier under, but I don't think like Kenny Omega is thinking about it that way. But we're just kind of left with these questions of like, why isn't Kenny Omega going for a world championship, or why isn't such and such going for this one? And ultimately, maybe we're just thinking too deep about it.
Yeah, well, it's it to me is a constant issue that comes up with the AEW tournaments. But it does kind of like slot these as well. Not that we won't get a pleasing match at the end of this, but the brackets. Starting tonight, we will get Orange Cassidy against Hechicero and Beast Mortos against a wild card entrant. Then on Saturday, it continues with Shibata against Ricochet and Mark Davis against Mark Briscoe, with all four winners meeting in a four-way next Wednesday. So in theory, next week we'll know what Kenny Omega's match is for Dynasty. And looking at this bracket, Way, is there an automatic pick here that you would assume would be the ultimate winner here?
I think Ricochet is really hot right now. I think coming off of the Swerve feud where he ultimately lost the feud, I think him winning the tournament and perhaps challenging Kenny in a main event type of match or at least in a heavily promoted match for Dynasty feels like it would be an appropriate feud. Otherwise, I'm expecting a heel to win it, so I can't expect it to be the wild card. Yeah, Mark Davis also, I guess, would be somebody that makes sense. Although for a dynasty, that would be pretty underwhelming.
Yeah, I would look at this as Ricochet being a likely one, but if you really want to introduce Speedball in a big way, having him do a babyface match with Kenny Omega on the pay-per-view, I mean that really does put Speedball on the map as well. The Opps come out, and we get a brief face-to-face with Shibata and Omega, as Shibata will be in the tournament. The Opps take on Vinny Pacifico, Eli Thesis, and Gabriel Eros. And after Hook threw around Eros, Shibata came in to murder Pacifico and win with a PK in 2 minutes and 17 seconds. And that was it for the Opps.
Quick squash to give Shibata the win to put him into focus ahead of the Ricochet match on Saturday. That's all.
Well, Ricochet is backstage. He said he was screwed at Revolution. He didn't want that ugly-ass robe anyway, so he has given up on this robe. His sights are now set on the international title, and he is giving Shibata the option to forfeit. It's still my time in AEW. And the announcers explained that there is no quit in Shibata. So that'll be an interesting match on Saturday in Las Vegas. Then we announce a rematch between Jon Moxley and Cope next Wednesday in a street fight for the AEW title. The winner will defend against Swerve at Dynasty. And this kind of feels like a make good.
A make good for what? People who were upset by the finish on Sunday?
I thought it was a make good just for Sunday. It just felt like that was not the match we had in us. And let's have a do-over.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
I mean, this obviously, the storyline reason they are giving here is that Cope did not give up and didn't even lose the match, and therefore is owed this rematch that they're going to do next week.
Yeah, I mean, I just see it as them wanting to maybe justify, a reason to run a pretty heavily promoted match back on TV to just spike a rating that week. I mean, is there a some reason to try to give people more, to change the opinion of this feud because it was poorly received on Sunday? I don't think so.
I feel with the street fight component, I feel they will have a much better match next week than they did at the pay-per-view.
I think not having to follow the matches that they followed, they will probably have
that's going to help as well. That's also going to help. They showed a clip of Swerve from last Sunday stating he's challenging for the belt. He's choosing Dynasty, which is the event where he won the title last year. And Cope walks in saying, I didn't lose at Revolution, and it could be the two of them at the pay-per-view, and the two show respect to one another. This followed their off-air interaction in the ring after the pay-per-view ended on Sunday as well. So they're at least dangling the idea that this could be your Dynasty main event, which it won't be, but that's our tease. Then Moxley does a promo, really good promo here, that he should have iced Cope before Christian even had the chance to get involved. He knew that Cope was hurt, but he kept coming forward. And I don't know what Cope is made of. It's very rare, though. And as my dad said, measure twice, cut once. He underestimated Cope's resolve and toughness. And there's a difference between amateurs and professionals. And I never make the same mistake twice.
Yeah. Excellent promo, I thought, from Jon Moxley. No matter how you feel about his current storyline, I think in these sort of individual segments, he continues to be just a very strong performer. Just able to just convey such a unique tone and serious tone for like a final boss type of character,
Yeah, and it's still no indication about like Claudio and Pac, and no follow-up on Yuta on the show either. So I'm sure that will come into focus next Wednesday as well. Hologram and Powerhouse Hobbs against Brian Cage and Dralistico, with Harley Graham in the mask ringside with Hologram and Hobbs. So the beginning here, Dralistico is tugging at the mask of Hologram, and then we get spots here with Hologram going for this tope suicida onto Brian Cage, who catches him into a vertical suplex on the floor. That got a big reaction. Cage hits a big pop-up powerbomb to Hologram, and then into a powerbomb into Hobbs in the corner. Cage does a deadlift to Hobbs, which was very impressive. And then Hobbs is laying there from this deadlift. Dralistico goes for a springboard splash, but he completely misses Powerhouse Hobbs, but goes for the pin anyway. And then he just stops. He just stands up as though, okay, this is not a believable pin. And at this point, Hobbs and Dralistico, they were not on different pages. They were in different languages, in different libraries, on different continents for the rest of this. These two were just so off for the final, their interaction here, because Hobbs, he goes to lift Dralistico and loses him and has to pick him up again for a power slam. Taz just goes, oh, he's mad now. And there's a spine buster to Cage on the edge. That kind of takes him off. And Hologram springs off the chest of Hobbs to the floor. And Dralistico goes for this like shaky springboard and gets caught with the spine buster. Not so smooth. And Hobbs just pins him. 10 minutes, 39 seconds. I thought this just totally fell apart with Hobbs and Dralistico from the springboard splash attempt on through the finish.
Yeah, I don't disagree with some of those spots. But overall, I still felt it was a pretty fun match here. You know, to me, like, the pairings don't really have much reason to be in a match with each other, but it's stylistically, you can understand why Tony booked this match. It's fun just to kind of mix high flyers with, like, your, I guess, meat division. You know, this kind of felt like fighter tanks and jets and all fighting against and with each other. And for the better part of this match, I actually really enjoyed it.
I mean, Hologram, I thought, shined in this. Like, he had some cool spots using Hobbs as like a base, and him and Cage, I thought, really worked well together for some of the stuff they had laid out. It was just the other pairing that not so much. Lance Archer and Mark Davis come out, and they just have words with Hobbs. Backstage, Alicia Toot was with Hurt Syndicate after the pay-per-view, and Lashley and Benjamin have been given the week off to go party, but they will not give up the gym this week. So they're still off to the gym. They're going to hang out with a CT Fletcher.
Yeah.
Who got a mention here in this promo by MVP. I hope we see that guy again.
Bring him back. Yeah.
There was this great video recap of the Toni Storm Mariah May feud, and out comes timeless Toni Storm to stand on the stage with the spotlight. She notes, with stitches in her lip, staples in her head, and glass in her ass, the tramp is still the champ. And a chunk of her heart will be gone forever, but it was well worth it for this. I am proud to be your women's champion. We have the most talented locker room, and fighting me is like visiting a zoo, because I will bleed like a pig, lick like a giraffe, and eat you like a lion. But I will never meow, because I am no pussy. So ladies, put your keys in the bowl and let's get this orgy started, which got a hell of a pop from this Fresno crowd. And then she gets plowed by Megan Bayne to end this segment.
I thought she was amazing here.
This was just amazing. Mainly because as I'm typing this, I'm also realizing I'm the one who has to read this.
Yeah, thank you for that, John.
Yes.
I think Toni Storm, she knows the character so well. The promos are so unique. They're so funny in a way that, like, it's a type of humor that we're not getting anywhere else in professional wrestling, and she just does it so effortlessly and does it so well. She's just so
and,
good,
and keeps it straight too, like her delivery
amazing.
and such. Like, she's just so. I think there's a lot of performers that would break with some of the stuff, but she's just stoic in the delivery, and it's really something.
I think this was notable for the Mercedes Moné mention. You know, talking about belt collectors, so maybe we can expect that encounter belt for belt, perhaps even sooner than later. That would, at present time, I think, be the biggest women's match AEW can make. So we'll see when we get that. And then Megan Bayne looks to be in the immediate future. It's a very different type of wrestler for our follow-up story compared to Mariah May, of course, but I personally think it's a little early for Bayne. You know, I don't think she's been that well established yet, nor have I seen enough from her to make me feel like she would be capable of what I'm assuming will be a story that demands a bit more speaking, a bit more acting even. But I'm very curious to see how Toni Storm, through the timeless Toni Storm sort of filter, will interpret Megan Bayne as a character.
Beast Mortos is out, and the wild card entrant is the debuting Speedball Mike Bailey. And the crowd gave him a good reaction here, which is what you could expect. I mean, going to a place like, you know, this was an audience that, I mean, we talked about, you know, this was a big arena that they were running, but they hit it well, I would say. And the 3,500 or so that were here, they did make noise for a lot of the key spots. And a Mike Bailey debuting in this setting, it it could have been a crapshoot of how they would react to Speedball Mike Bailey, but it came across well. Immediately gets the Speedball chance, and it was an identification that like we look at this guy, we know who he is, and it felt like a big deal that he was here, as opposed to confusion over perhaps who this guy is.
Agreed. I thought the crowd, like you could hear maybe a small vocal minority just even cheer at like this is, from what I gather, a new theme song. I actually really enjoyed it. It felt like very inspired by, Brass Monkey, but not in a way that felt like a ripoff. But just at the mere sort of like refrain of Speedball, these people were already some people were already cheering. And then once they got confirmation with the name, I thought they gave him a great reaction tonight.
Yeah, maybe his alternate idea was to come out to the Canadian national anthem, and they decided maybe we shouldn't be doing that right now.
Well, he is representing Canada, the lone Canadian representative in this tournament.
So they begin, and I thought this was a great opponent for Speedball. Mortos is just like, he's such a great just utility player for this kind of the different places you can put him in with all different styles. Mortos misses this flying knee in the corner, so he goes to the floor and is hit by a Tope Con Hero with Bailey landing on his feet. Bailey hits a golden triangle, then a Liger bomb out of the corner, and goes for Ultima Weapon, but misses as Mortos is out of the way, who grabs him with a pop-up Samoan, and then they fight on top. Mortos hits a military press slam from the top turnbuckle, follows with a backbreaker and discus lariat, but as he goes for the power bomb, Bailey counters with a Rana, does a moonsault knee drop, and then the tornado roundhouse kick. Maybe we'll call this the Canadian Visa. And he nails Mortos for the victory in 10 minutes and 57 seconds. So Bailey advances to the four-way next week. Really good outing for both of these guys. I thought a really great pairing for Bailey's debut in the company.
I think if you're looking for a match that'll get somebody excited about a new wrestler, I definitely think they achieved that here with Bailey. I don't know if you could find a better opponent to showcase this style at this level of, I guess, like pushed wrestler than a Beast Mortos. I think they actually made each other's stuff look really good. Both of them were flawlessly executing everything that they were doing, which, it just in creation is very difficult. So I think it was a good debut, and I think, to me at least, and I think for a good chunk of the audience, Mike Bailey is another guy that you could just really advertise on a marquee and people will get excited for it, because I think that was the effect he had on the indies at the very least, like WrestleMania week. WrestleMania weekend's not, well, I guess we don't know about his status during WrestleMania weekend this year, whether or not he's free, but I'm assuming he won't be looking.
I think his days of those endurance weekends are a thing of the past.
It's going to feel very different without having like 12 like speedball matches, to talk about and talking about which one would actually stole the weekend. But like, he's the type of guy that you can just show on a marquee next to somebody who's also a very good wrestler, and you can immediately get excited for that. So I'm looking forward to him getting pushed, at least to start. I hope a year from now we're not going to be speaking of him as just like a commander or like, a Beast Mortos, somebody who's like, again, like has that name card value, but isn't actually pushed, And I think the difference between wrestlers that actually get pushes and wrestlers that end up in more supporting roles is their ability to talk. And I know that's probably, Mike.
Well, that's his weakest part. Like that's very clear.
So, but I'm really hoping that there's been some evolution in that department, and that he can build that for himself the way like a Ricochet has.
What if he was having difficulties securing his visa and he gave over his power of attorney to Don Callis and the Don Callis family, and he will be there against his will and have a talker for him?
I mean, that pairing isn't the worst pairing, but I mean, anything to do with law and contracts and stuff.
They're batting 1,000. Yeah. The logic of debuting him in this tournament, I mean, yeah, he could have a great showing next week, but it's almost kind of puzzling if you put him in this tournament not to win. Like, let's give him the best introduction here. And I don't think a Kenny Omega speedball match on a couple weeks' notice for a pay-per-view is the worst option of where you can go for this. Like, sure, Ricochet would be the bigger match with Kenny Omega. I grant you that. But I certainly don't think there would be that... there's much of a difference than going with Speedball, and it's a really exciting match to build. I mean, either option you're talking about a
will they do a double Canadian international title match though?
Oh yeah, I thought you were going to talk about like a double finish next week, which is always in the offer. We could get a 5-way next week out of that 4-way. They all have simultaneous pins, and they all lay claim to your international champion. I wonder what a battle of Canadians would generate in a big American city like Philadelphia. I mean, the options are endless.
Probably pretty positive reaction.
Yeah, it might be.
I don't think they care as much. Yeah.
Renee interviews the patriarchy and asks about Christian opting to cash in his casino gauntlet contract on Sunday. And Cage says, "You are related to John Moxley. I won't speak to you," and kicks Renee out of the scene. Cage says, "I am still the
very
next..."
fair, by the way. I mean, I think he kind of has
there was a gigantic conflict of interest here, and Renee did kind of have to absolve herself from this. Cage is still going to be the next champion. He wants the contract returned to him because he blames the referee for terrible officiating. I signed for a one-on-one match with Cope, and the Moxley choke was illegal. I did not tap out, nor did I pass out. I was simply regulating my breathing, which was a tremendous line. And out of nowhere, Nick Wayne steps up to Cage and says, "You're just making excuses. You lied to everyone. You didn't stick to the plan. I want an apology." And he shoves Nick. So Mother Wayne steps in between Son and Christian. And he threatens to send Mother Wayne back to her midnight shift at the Waffle House. And Cage asks Nick, "How many world titles have you won? Huh? How many titles has your father won? If I hadn't have found you, you would have ended up like a loser, just like your father, a coward who died in front of your mother's face. And I will be AEW champion if it's the last thing I do, and you should just keep riding my coattails." So
they lose this like big contract gimmick that, you know, was like the crowning achievement of the stable. And now suddenly they're doing something interesting with this group. I actually was pretty compelled by this entire thing. I thought Cage exhibited great intensity, and I thought for what felt like a bit of a first, you know, like, or at least like maybe one of the biggest speaking roles he's ever had on TV so far, I thought it was a really good showing from Nick Wayne. So man, if this was like the sort of tension that they were establishing earlier throughout the months while they had the contract, I wonder if the audience might have felt a little bit more receptive to the possibility of an actual successful Christian.
Oh, of course. I just that was my only complaint here, is that this was so out of left field, and we're going to like the fracturing as step one, as opposed to just little things building it up. To me, it was the same stuff with Yuta with Moxley, where it's like all of a sudden it's this, we're hitting the breaking point when there had been nothing leading into this. But I will give you that this is definitely a more, I think, intriguing direction. I also feel like we're going to see Christian all over this street fight next week as well, and keeping him attached to whatever scene that is. If it's some fallout with Cope, that he leaves that program with some attachment to Christian, and Copeland getting involved in this story too. The father-in-law, maybe Copeland. He's gonna adopt Kip and Nick.
Wow.
MJF comes out, complain. Oh, first of all, we had Lexi Nair on Sunday walking into MJF's locker room, where he is in the mirror calling himself a fraud, and then punches the mirror and catches Lexi and tells her to leave. And then we just go to regular MJF walking out and not selling any of this.
Well,
you ever done this?
Mean, a broken mirror out of frustration? No, I haven't.
But yelling at the mirror.
Yelling at the mirror? No, not out loud. I don't know if I'd do it out loud. I would do it in my,
with a camera crew interrupting you.
Well, he didn't know the camera was there, right, John? And this was just, I think, a glimpse into like the thought process behind a bully. Like, I mean, what's the classic sort of like, I don't know, mental breakdown of a bully. Like they exhibit some toughness on the surface, but they're actually very fragile people on the inside. And we got a glimpse of that fragility here in this sort of backstage candid footage from MJF.
Well, he comes out complaining of a headache and being in pain, insults Fresno, and had the match won on Sunday when Page used a cheap shot to win. "I'm smarter than you, Hangman, and all of your fans. It's not over yet." And he is interrupted by MVP, who comes out, and we tease issues between these two, but then they embrace. And MVP explains their history, that he met Max when he was 18, volunteering to drive MVP to some documentary shoot, with the only request that if he drove him, that he could ask him about the wrestling business. And MVP was very impressed with the questions that a young Maxwell Jacob Friedman was asking him. And then we met in a indie company in South Florida where the world never ends. And he told MVP that he would be a world champion, and he in fact did it. And he's proud of him, but I'm not proud of what you did on Sunday. You're whining when you need to be angry, and you need to be hurting people. You've lost your edge. The guys in the back don't respect you. They also don't fear you, but they do fear the Hurt Syndicate. And he presents his card to Max, stating it's a golden ticket for him to turn his career around. MJF turns it down, stating he doesn't need his help nor advice. I was champion for 406 days. And MVP emphasizes the word was and hands the card, leaving Maxwell Jacob Friedman to ponder his inclusion in the Hurt Syndicate.
I thought a great segment. MJF was responsible for several very strong segments on the show. This was totally unexpected follow-up for the both of them coming off of Revolution. I also wonder if MVP encouraging Bobby and Shelton to take the week off was supposed to be some intentional way of trying to let us know that he's doing this without their approval. So we wait to see where this heads. They, MVP and MJF, I think, are two of the best talkers in the entire company. And with some real history together, I'm very curious to see what they can create together, whether two work as a team or more likely maybe as opponents with each other. What do you see being the direction for MJF here? Can you see him turning back to a babyface?
I think that is obviously the long-term play with MJF. Is here's this guy that at his heart just wants to be loved by this audience who the idea is consistently reject him. I think ultimately we do get to that spot, but I think that there has been such a shift in his character that some stability is greatly required. And I'm not on the surface opposed to whatever they're doing here with the Hurt Syndicate, but we do have quite the history of MJF in some of these groups that for whatever reason, they just did not click and you did not get what you anticipated, even though the individual parts all seemed like this could be a great direction with him as the leader. It just has not panned out that way. So I don't know. He's been like this very difficult character over the last year, and I think he is coming off probably his most well-received work in the past year with Hangman Page. So this follow-up is pretty important. I just don't know what the end game is here, and I would expect him to. This Owen tournament is going to start very soon, and he should be one of the players at least in that tournament, and one of the many that. The story for the next few months should be everyone is shooting for the title match at All In, which is the big show of the year. And I think you want to isolate who your big guys are. And that would be a spot that you would assume MJF has one of those spots in that tournament.
Sure. Yeah. But there's still some time, before we get there. So in the meantime, I'm very curious to see where this Hurt business.
Yeah. This is an interesting direction, at least on, step one of wherever this goes. And you're at least interested to see where it went and leaning on that history that the two have. And then the Max Caster Open Challenge, which is answered by Konosuke Takeshita, who Caster warns, I would kill you in a match, and thinks that maybe I should join the Don Callis family and I can headline the Tokyo Dome. And anyway, he gets blasted with a forearm smash and the Raging Fire and loses in a minute 30.
Yeah.
Nothing to add.
Well, speaking of potential turns, Takeshita came out here without Don Callis. And to a very babyface spot, coming out to beat up the annoying heel underling here or undercard guy in Max Caster. So I felt it was very clear that they are, judging by this, perhaps in the process of turning him babyface. So I found that to be pretty notable.
Yeah, they're all if they go that direction.
Couple this with Omega giving him the respect in that promo earlier.
Yeah, and certainly I think you would expect that Omega Takeshita to revisit that at some point here. Maybe that is something that happened. Kenny Omega could have all of his next pay-per-views all lined up, but the idea of one more match with Takeshita, whatever you do at Double or Nothing, and then I think everyone expects the big Okada rematch in July. So how Takeshita fits in, we will see. Jericho is seen with holding up Gravity's mask. He humiliated Bandito in front of his family. How do you come back from that? I stopped letting people get comfortable around me, and he just crumples up the mask and drops it. Again, the more serious side of Chris Jericho here for Bandito to respond at some point.
It was a good, very serious, Hamlet type of soliloquy from Jericho here. And I think, the intent here is to try to carry some of that serious tone from Sunday where the angle I thought conveyed that very well. I enjoyed it. Like this was a nice creative way of doing a different Jericho promo that got us away from typical learning tree stuff.
See, I couldn't help though than watching this promo and this visual, and just in my head, all I can think of is Jericho moving his hand and the mask just stays there and floats.
Really?
Because it's gravity. Willow Nightingale against Penelope Ford was next. Ford is 2-0 in their previous matches, Way. Do you remember those from 2021 and 2022? Those were brought up here. Willow is getting beaten down, comes back with clotheslines, tries for the Babe with the powerbomb. It is countered. And then there's a gory special by Willow. Ford bites her way free and executes an armbar in the ropes, lands a high cross, and then after doing like the Matrish, hits a stunner, comes off the ropes, and Willow nails her with this big pounce, winning in 8 minutes and 39 seconds. Willow is celebrating when Penelope Ford attacks her with a chair, prompting Chris Statlander to come out and save her. Willow gains consciousness and is not sure who hit her, looking at Chris. And then Megan Bayne comes in, laying out both, including Statlander with an F5. So Megan Bayne was very busy on this show.
Yeah, so she's involved in this current program. Obviously Statlander and Willow versus Bayne and Ford. Clear direction there, but I'm curious to see if Toni Storm is somehow rolled into all of this, and if we get a Toni Storm sort of team up with a Statlander and a Willow, and if they somehow interact with each other. So curious to if we, because right now, like the women's division is sort of very segmented. You're either going for the world championship, or you're going for Monet's championship, or you're Statlander and Willow, and you're just kind of like on your own.
Or you're off TV.
Or your Thunder Rosa, and just like, you occasionally pop up. So I'm curious to see if Toni Storm will now kind of blend with some of these other parts of the division.
Renee interviews Mercedes Moné, who is was nailed in the throat with that kick in the match, so she can barely speak. Billy Starks walks in. She had taken her notes at the event and is issuing a challenge for Mercedes next week, and Moné laughs this off, stating, "You're out of your league, but we'll meet her next week." So there we have it. Another title match. They are loading up this show for next week. So we will get the street fight, this match, and the 4-way happening in Omaha, Nebraska.
Yeah, I think too early for Billy Starks. Again, like they haven't established her enough on these shows. Like what she came in and
the note taker.
She spoke for Momo Watanabe a few times, took notes, and now we're immediately getting to the title shot. I think she needed a little bit more of a showcase and a little bit more of an establishing before people might actually care about her actually going for a championship. But it's maybe that's their way of kicking things off.
Tony Schiavone brings out Will Ospreay, who just hobbles his way out. He looks like he was hit by a truck on Sunday, which was probably would have been less impactful than some of the damage he took in the steel cage match. He states he is injured. He still has 4 stitches in his head, shows off his chest that's taped up, and I was scared for my life, and I struggled to keep up with Kyle Fletcher. Thanks the people for carrying him through. Kyle will be a world champion one day. But Ospreay admits, I was in trouble with my wife, because I was warned not to do anything stupid coming off the top of the cage. And he describes the Spanish Fly, and when he got to the back, he had 15 missed calls from her, but promised that he is going to cook dinner for her this weekend. And he wants to be the guy when he calls his shot. And where can I call my shot than the biggest show of the year, as he looks up at the all-in sign for Texas. I want to be in the main event, so I'm entering the Owen Hart tournament. Whether I face Cope, Swerve, or Moxley, the assassin is coming for the throne, and I want to be the world champion.
I don't know how I felt about this stand-up routine from Ospreay, honestly.
Yeah, he was. I don't know. He's trying to be very endearing to the audience, but this was a mixed bag.
And he has been like he has done a great job of doing that in the past. But I this one didn't feel right. I didn't feel like I needed to know all this stuff with his wife. Like primarily, I didn't need to feel like what he did on Sunday was more of a performance than an actual fight. You know, like rather than like. In a fight, you don't know that you're going to jump off the cage. Like, you don't know you're going to be in that position where you're going to do a Spanish fly or something. Like, the way he kind of spoke about this with his wife and turning it into a bit of a cute story, to me, took off, like, the edge out of what was a very violent encounter. And I would have much rather he kind of talk about it seriously as if he had just been through the fight of his life, rather than whatever this
I don't disagree. I think they should have presented this as like the most violent steel cage match AEW has ever had, and these two performers will never be the same. Look at Will, who's just barely holding on here. Like, you could still get to the Owen stuff and eyeing all of that, but I don't disagree. Like, I don't think you would have, if you had just tuned into this show, realized the level that they reached in this steel cage match. And that's something I'll always harp on, is that they put on just these unbelievable pay-per-views, but part of that is also marketing them and being able to take the impact of these matches and convey them to the audience that maybe did not see this. And I think they kind of skirted through that here.
Yeah. The rest of it was fine. You know, like the Owen should feel really big this year. It should feel very star-studded the way Rumble and Chamber have this year, where every main eventer should want that spot at All In.
Yeah, and it should be a lot earlier this year, because by the time Double or Nothing is over, you should have, like, the final should be that Double or Nothing, and then you have the build to July 12th. Renee interviews Jay White, who proposes a future match with Will Ospreay, and for him to get to the title, you better keep me away from him. And then is asked if he hit Cope on purpose at Revolution, and he quizzes the fans who believe he did, but he denies it and says, I have done everything to take out the Death Riders. I had the title won at World's End, and I will not let anyone else take his spot as number one contender, and highly teasing the idea that we will see probably Jay White get involved in this street fight next week, or at the least kind of be hovering in this championship picture.
Setting up several programs for himself here. Obviously, the Ospreay tease very shortly. I thought a much more animated Jay White promo than we've had in recent weeks, where he's felt very subdued. I think, in trying to play more of a straight up babyface. Now he's definitely sounding a lot more like a heelish Jay White. So, did he do it on purpose? Find out. Who did he do it for?
Well, maybe Christian Cage has just adopted a new son.
There's a big age difference, isn't there, between them?
No, it's I'm sure it's a believable father-son dynamic that Christian and Jay White could have. The Jays.
The Jays.
Renee speaks with Hangman, or at least tries to. He bumps into MJF, and Hangman says, you tried to light me on fire, but I don't think you meant it. He's basically saying you were bluffing.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'd be doubting someone if they doused me in kerosene. I'd be like, I think you're ready to do this, regardless of if you like the match or not. But MJF says that now that we are done, I get to go on and become a multiple-time champion. You, Hangman, will never reach the pinnacle. You're always going to come up short, and your insecurity is not believing you deserve the love of the fans. And you know what? You're right. And you will never reach the top again, and as you try to climb up that mountain, I'm going to laugh at you the entire way. So the idea here is that these two will be connected to one another, and both have their insecurities that kind of align themselves with this ultimate goal of not just the championship, but the audience's approval. And it felt as though we're separating for now, but they want this to be one of those kind of generational programs in this company that these two will be linked with, going back to the very first show.
They kind of feel like the Batman and Joker here, where I guess, I don't know, every few years you're going to get a Batman Joker storyline. And it'll never, ever end. But
and neither knows which one is Batman.
Yeah, sure, exactly. Either could be a Batman depending on the month, but they have a very unique sort of philosophical contrast in their relationships with the audience that I mean I want to see explored, in a lot more depth, and I feel like they just kind of scratched the surface on. I mean, you listen to a promo like this, and it does actually make me think that they are pushing MJF more towards a babyface direction sooner than later. You have Page here trying to tell us that within MJF is somebody who's not exactly as evil or as devilish as he claims to be, and that he actually cares a whole lot about what people think. That deep down he's just a sensitive, little boy. And that could be interpreted as a way to insult him, but it could also be a way to maybe sort of like sell him as a more likable, hurt person on the inside to the audience.
Yeah, it's the difference between if you decide to light somebody on fire, you're a monster that will be locked away for the rest of your life. But if you only douse someone in gasoline but don't actually spark the match, that's a cry for help. You're deep down a hero.
Well, I mean, as somebody who has lit things on fire, maybe Hangman would know that.
Yeah, this is some interesting life lessons that you get out of AEW programming that I did not contemplate outside of this program. Orange Cassidy, Hechicero. So we will see how this holds up in the main event quarter. Jim Ross was on commentary, and Hechicero, I mean, this was a fun match for the time that it lasted. Not a super long main event, but Hechicero, he is working on the arm with all these interesting manipulations of the arm, then goes for the leg with a dragon screw in the ropes, and from there, this spinning hammerlock backbreaker. So you've got Cassidy, just all of his body falling apart here, manages the stun dog and a satellite DDT, but as he goes for the kip up, his knee gives out, and he tries for the elbow off the top. He's caught in the armbar by Hechicero. Cassidy makes it to the rope, and then goes for this tilt-a-whirl, and unfortunately, this one kind of got messed up, but I guess you could, if you want to be charitable, you could assign this to the damage that had been done by Hechicero. Manages to get to the mousetrap. Not the smoothest setup for this, but it was the finish. Pins Hechicero, and Cassidy joins Speedball in the four-way, with Speedball coming out for the closing shot.
I thought the match, again, really showed Orange Cassidy's versatility as a wrestler, being able to just wrestle honestly any style that you kind of allow him to. And he was able to both work technically here while still incorporating a lot of his gimmick in here. I love the hands in the pocket stuff, especially working against somebody like Hechicero. I found that pretty unique. Hechicero, I thought overall looked really good. And I think almost like an expected but very worthy selection for this sort of opening round of an international tournament as the sort of Mexican, or one of the Mexican representatives.
Yeah, it just felt to me like a match on a Dynamite that this would open a show or be just thrown into the middle, much less than your main event. I'd be curious what they had initially planned for this show. And that was kind of the vibe I had for these 2 hours. It just felt to me like a show that was below usual Dynamite standards. You actually did have some real sloppiness in some of these matches that you don't typically get in AEW shows. But I did think the introduction of Speedball was done pretty effectively, and it was a nice added touch having him as the last visual that you saw at the end of the night. He wasn't just forgotten with the win, and it certainly feels like they do have their ducks in a row for a significant TV show next week that they were promoting throughout the show. The MJF MVP segment was fine as well. Some of the talking stuff, you can at least see that they are initiating a lot of new stories kind of after a lot of culminations on Sunday and setting a lot of your top stars into new directions, getting the Owen introduced. It was kind of just laying the foundation, but I did think this was a show that was kind of hampered probably by other outside factors from the pay-per-view.
Yeah, pretty much anybody who was at a major match, or at least one of the more exhaustive talked about matches on Sunday, came out here and talked and didn't necessarily have a match. And I compared to maybe your usual AEW Dynamite, in terms of in-ring, yeah, this was probably a bit more lacking, certainly in terms of like in-ring star power. But I felt like having them come out and either speak or like do push us towards new angles was still very effective. Like MJF and MVP as a new direction is one that I didn't expect and I'm very curious by. Ospreay, I think, didn't really have one of his better outings, but he did announce himself for the Owen, which was something. And then you have the tournament that kind of took us the rest of the way.
Yeah, we had enough talking segments on this show that you might have thought that the ring post broke.
Yes.
All right. Well, everybody, those were our thoughts on Dynamite. We are here live every single Wednesday night when Dynamite finishes. If you want to get the full Rewind to Dynamite experience, you can go XL for $6 a month at postwrestlingcafe.com. That not only gives you live access on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday nights with us, but also access to all of our extra shows, including this week's edition of Talk, where Wai and I sat down for over an hour here in our studio chatting about life, Wai dropping the big bombshell that the whole world is talking about that I can't even say here and disclose, but you can find out for yourself. Plus, Rewind Away, which will be back next week. And what are we talking about next week on a special edition of Rewind Away?
Ryan Charco, our executive producer, has chosen for us to talk about Beatles 64, a new documentary on Disney Plus about the Beatles in, I believe, like their first actual year of prominence. So it's a topic that I'm very excited to discuss.
Yes. When I first saw this title, I thought we were going to be reviewing a Nintendo game. So good thing I clarified. That's going to be coming up next week. As well, we will be dropping our Scott D'Amore interview for everybody free on Thursday. 30 minutes chatting with Scott D'Amore about many, many different topics, from TNA to Maple Leaf Pro Wrestling and other topics covered as well. So we will say goodbye to people on the free feed, but if you're an XL subscriber, you don't have to adjust anything, because now it's time to move on to your feedback.